Imagine me and you, I do. I think about you day and night. It's only right to think about the girl you love and hold her tight.
Welcome to Crazy Carrot Studios. My name is James, and today we will be going over creating a basic pause menu. Alright, back in our project here, we're going to go ahead and create a pause menu to work with our game. Now, because we'll be dealing mostly with the UI and a few scripts to handle the UI, we're not going to be doing much to the actual 3D space, so you can go ahead and select 2D view. And we're going to go ahead and look into our canvas where we got our health slider and stamina slider. We're just going to create a new panel. I'm just going to create it as an empty and call this pause menu panel. Now, there are many different ways we can create a pause menu. This is a pause menu at its simplistic form. We're not trying to get into too much detail. We just want to make sure that it's going to look good on our canvas and be functional for what we're trying to do. So we're going to take this pause menu panel because we want the panel to actually stretch across the canvas. So again, we're going to go ahead and click in the rect transform and make sure we do the anchor presets to stretch across the entire thing by doing Alt and Shift and selecting down here. So as you can see, now we're stretched across the entire canvas. It's going to match our pause panel. And I want to make sure that we have a background to this. So we're going to create a UI image. And we're going to call this one background. And I am just going to make it a nice, we'll go with a green. And this one here also needs a stretch. So we're going to stretch that all the way across. So now our background has a color. And let's not make it like that. Let's make it a darker. There we go. That'll work. And from here, we want to create the buttons. So let's go ahead and create another preset, another empty game object. And it's going to be under the pause menu as well. So create empty. And we're going to call this buttons panel. And for this one here, just like we've done in some others, we're going to create a vertical layout group. And we're going to deselect the width. And we want this to probably be centered, so let's go upper center. Now the other thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this panel is going to be more about the size we want all of our buttons to fit in. So first I'm going to stretch it across the entire canvas. And then I'm going to bring it in towards the center. And if you look here on the left and the right, you know, we can kind of get an idea that center is one spot. We can bring it in to match. So let's make them both 1050. Now, of course, with you using a different canvas size, it might be a different number, but adjust it accordingly for yourself. Now, from the top, I want to bring it down, let's just say about right here. The bottom doesn't really matter quite as much. Let's bring this in a little bit more. So, we'll say about... There we go. Now, the other thing I want to do is I want to create another panel for the title. So, again, we're going to create another empty. And I'm going to stretch this one to the top across the entire width. So we're going to do it just like that, but I'm going to bring it down to about where the pause starts, the pause button panel starts. Let's bring it above it, and let's call this pause menu title. Okay, inside the pause menu title, we're going to create a UI. And I'm going to use TextMesh Pro, and I want the text element. Now, again, I like to keep things pretty universal on this stuff. So it's going to stretch across the entire menu panel, but we are going to center it by coming down here to the TextMesh Pro and centering exactly where we want. We're going to call it pause menu. So go ahead and just put that inside your TextBrush Pro text element here, and then we can auto size it to try to fit. Now that's kind of a little small because our max is set at 72 here. I'm going to go ahead and set my max to, let's say, 300. And so now we've got a nice big pause menu to look. So when it comes in, it's going to look just like that. And I am sorry, but I just do not like that green. Oh, that's horrible. So we're going to go to more of a blue here. Let's see how that's going to look. That looks a little better. Okay, so now that we got our pause menu title going, we need to create the buttons that are going to fit inside our buttons panel. Now, because we did a vertical layout group, this should match pretty easily on the spacing. So what we're going to do is first create a UI TextBrush Pro button. And we're just going to go ahead and size this up. I will go with about, say on the width, we'll go about 200. Let's say, well, let's tell you what, let's go, on mine I'm going to go 500. But then I'm going to make this about 75. So if we looked at it, it's going to look something like that. You may want to adjust that even more. I'm going to go ahead and bring that up to 100 to give it more of a button look. That works a little better. And then inside here, we get the text. I want this one to be resume game. All right. So I want to auto size it to fit inside there. And I want it to be bold. So when we come back in here to look, you see resume game. Fits right inside of our button the way we probably want. So we're going to call this resume game button. And then we're going to duplicate this one. Control D. And let's see. That did not work the way I wanted it to. Let's go ahead and take a look. There we go. The height is one I wanted to remove, not so much the width. And the reason why is it stacks it perfectly the way we want, and we're just going to create a spacing. Let's go with a 50, so it gives a nice little space. And you'll notice here, if we come back into this button panel, into the scene view, we can now move this down, and everything inside of it's going to stay according. So if you think it's too high up, you can still adjust it. It's not going to make a difference. And that's pretty much exactly what we want. The other thing you could also do is if you wanted, you could do middle center, and it's going to bring it straight to the center of the game. And that's, in fact, I think that looks a little better right this moment, so we're going to keep it that way. And this second one that we created, since it's not going to be resume, obviously, we'll just title this one the quit game button. So if you wanted to exit out of the game completely, you can just quit. And we're going to retitle that to quit game. Just like so. Now, I'm going to try to keep this thing at a reasonable size for all of them. And since that resume game seems to be hitting that edge pretty good, I'm going to go ahead and try to extend these out a little bit more. And let's make that width, let's say 600 on this one. There, that gives it a little bit of space. And I'll make the height 125. All right, that just looks a little bit cleaner. Now, again, we can also color our buttons if we wish, however you want to do it. You can also, actually, that didn't look too bad. Oh, get back to there. Something like that. And you can also color your text if you wanted to do something like that by going to your text part and actually setting the vertex color to be whatever you may want. I'm going to leave it as it is right this minute, but just to show you a few things you can do to make it customizable for yourself. Again, the same thing with the pause menu title. We come to the text, we can give it a black title or a red or anything else you may want. You can also change the font. If you have a TextBrush Pro font, you can add it right in here, and it'll allow you to make that a little more customizable as well. But for what we're doing, this works perfectly fine. So now that we've got a resume game and a quit game, you may also want to create a main menu so you can link it back to the main menu. You might want to create a settings in here. For right now, this is all I'm really concerned with, is I want to be able to pause the game, have everything freeze in the background, be able to come in here and resume it, or exit out of the game completely. Now, the quick game will not work while we're in the inspector. It will work if you do a build out, but that's for another time. So right now, let's go ahead and just write up the code to make this work and function so that it turns on and off based on activating and inactivating the pause menu panel. So it'll look just something like this whenever you hit the escape key or something like that. So let's go to the next part of this and create an input from our input system for the escape key or whatever keyboard input you would like to have it set to. So the next one we are going to do is go into our scripts folder where we have our player controller asset here for the input, and we're going to create a new action map, and we're going to call this UI. Now inside our actions, we want to use this and call this a pause. And then when we drop this down, we've got a binding here. Let's go ahead and set that to our escape key. So when we stretch this down, we can hit listen and just type in escape. Oh, that didn't work. Let's just type it in there. Escape with keyboard. And then the next thing we can do is go ahead and hit the plus, add a binding, and set one up for our gamepad. And do it much the same way. We just drop down, do the listen, and find the gamepad button that you want to use. I'm going to be using the same one that most games typically use with my Xbox controller. And you'll notice here it comes up as start gamepad, or on Xbox it's called the menu. So we're just going to go ahead and do the gamepad because it's a generic one. And that will serve our purposes right there. So let's go ahead and save our asset and exit out of this. Excellent. So now it's time to, let's create a little folder just to keep things a little bit more organized in here because we've not been doing a very good job of that. And let's call this menu. So inside our scripts folder, we have a subfolder for menu. And then we're going to create a C# class called pause menu. All right, now that we have the pause menu class created, let's go ahead and create another empty inside our project here. And we're going to call this script manager, or anything else you may want to call it, game manager. And I'm going to use it to hold my scripts that I want to persist between different things. So in this particular case, we're going to drag the pause menu script right onto it. And that's what we're going to interact with. And then we're going to go ahead and go into our pause menu with Visual Studios and clean out the start and update functions like I have here. The other thing you're going to want to have is using Unity Engine.input system. And let's go ahead and start creating the first section of our variables that we're going to need for this particular project. So I'm just going to paste these in here. But in this first one, we're going to reference the UI pause action in the input system. So I'm doing that with a serialized field, private input action reference. And I'm just going to call this pause action. And just to show you what that exactly is, when we come back in here, let's go back into our project here and go to our script manager, you're going to see this pause action here. And if you open it up, you can see what it's looking like. What this is grabbing from our input actions that we created. If we were to extend this a little bit, you'll be able to see the different ones. And we want to use the UI pause into our, and that's the one we created right in here for the UI pause. So we just want to reference to that in our script. So that's what we've done there. Next, let's go back to our script, and we're going to go ahead and create another serialized field for the game object that's going to hold our pause menu panel. So again, let's go ahead and save this one more time, and let's take a look and see what that's exactly going to be doing. And we're going to drag in our pause menu panel, which we've labeled pause menu panel. We want to make sure we just drag that straight into the pause panel. And this is so that we can interact with it to activate and deactivate, not that part, when we're ready to see the pause menu. But in order for us to do that, we need to have a reference to it. And that's what this is doing. So let's go back in here to and create the next section. Now, whenever you're going to be doing this, there's a couple things you need to do is create an on enable and on disable to set up your inputs to go turn on and off when you need them and when you don't need them. So we're going to add a delegate function that's going to be the pause action, which is what we just labeled that input reference. And we're going to title it action.performed. It's going to pass in the button press, which is going to be called context. And it's going to send us to this pause game function that we have not created yet. Then we want to make sure we pause action.action is enabled. So when the game starts, we are able to be, or whenever we're using the button, it's enabling it. And when we're not going to be doing it, or when we let go of the button, it's going to disable it. So we want to make sure we do another function that's going to be called on disable. And it's going to pretty much act the exact same thing. The only difference on the on disable is when we do the pause action, it's going to say .disable. And that's it. The next thing I will usually want to try to do is in a start method, I want to make sure that I am starting with our pause panel deactivated. And the best way to do that here is going to be setting the pause active in the start menu as pause panel dot set active, and we want it to be false because we do not want it to be active, and end it with a semicolon. So that will, even if you accidentally left it on, it's automatically going to turn it off for you at the start of the game, which is exactly what I want here. Now let's go ahead and create that elusive pause menu function that's throwing that error up here for the pause game. So we're going to set that down here, right underneath the start, and I'm going to call it pause game. And what it's going to do is it's going to set the time scale of your game to 0, and that's going to pause everything. If we set it to 1, it's going to be time scale equals 1. That's going to allow your game to run as normal. If you did 0.5, it'd be like half speed. Pause panel dot set active equals true. So basically, when we hit the escape key, the context is the escape key. It's going to perform it. When it hits that, it's going to pass it to the pause game function and set the pause panel to true and pause the game's timescale. So again, we need to do the same type of thing for the resume. It's just going to be slightly opposite. We're going to reset that timescale to 1 and set our pause game or pause panel back to false, just like so. Now, the last thing we want to do is create our quit function. Now, in our quit function, it's not going to necessarily work in the inspector the way we have it set up. If you built out your game, it would work, and this will show you what it's supposed to look like. But as of right now, it will not work while it's in the inspector gameplay. So you're doing a public void quit game, and we're going to call application.quit. And that's basically going to reach in and allow you to exit out of the application when you've got your game scene loaded and playing on a build mode. And that's pretty much it for the script. Now, like I said, it's a pretty simple script, and if you want to understand it, it really works well. There are a couple of issues here. One, we need to make sure that when we're doing a gamepad, that you're setting it up so it can be recognized. So typically what I will do is I will come to these two buttons here, and I'll make sure that I highlight the highlighted color, selected color, to match a yellow or whatever color you want for to show me it's being selected. And then in the event system, you'll notice here it's got a first selected. Make sure you attach your resume game button to first selected. And what that's going to do is automatically highlight it when you come into it. And that way it knows that's the first one you're trying to select, and it'll allow our gamepad to move up and down based on the button's navigation here, automatic or any other settings you might want to do. When you're looking in the scene view, you will see, it has the arrows going up and down, showing how the automatic is working. If you wanted it to loop through it, you could change that setting from automatic and make it where once it gets to the quick game, it circles back, but we only have 2, so it's going to work the same way. But it gives you an idea of how you can adjust some of those things. So let's go ahead and test this out now. Make sure I've got everything set up here. We got the script manager, we got the pause manager. So when we hit play, it should automatically deactivate our pause panel since we've got that set in the start. And you'll notice that it works perfectly with escape, and it did highlight the resume game the way we wanted. The only problem is we can't resume the game or quit the game, and that's mainly because we did not assign them in here. So what we want to do is come to your game button, go down to the on click, make sure, now when you first come in, it'll look like this. Just hit the plus button, drag in your script manager, and go to the pause menu, resume game. And that's only going to be accessible because we did make them public. So that pause game is actually listed here as public. Same thing with the quit. If you were to make that private, you would not be able to access them. So make sure you do have those set as public, and that'll allow you to come in here, drag in the script manager for the quit, go to pause menu, and quit game. Now when we do this, it should work as intended. I'm going to do this one with the gamepad using my same keys, and you can notice I can move it up and down, and I can hit resume and it comes right back in. But we can't really test the quit, can we? So let me show you another way. So in situations like this, there's a way to debug it where you're able to see what's going on and making sure that it is coming in here and quitting. So what we're going to do is what's called a debug log. And we are just going to say, inside quotes, what this is going to allow us to see what we want to say. And we're going to say quit function enabled, or whatever you want to call it. And then we're just end it up with a semicolon. Now what's going to happen is if the quit game function is actually called, it's going to put it in our console saying that it was enabled. So we should see that right in here. And it'll pop up right in this console telling us that we tried to hit quit. So let's try this out here. We're going to do escape. Try to hit quit. Sure enough, quit function enabled. Let's go back to resume. Perfect. Now let's test that resume and see if time is really stopping. So I'm going to come into my damage part. You notice it's damaging me. I'm going to pause it, and we're going to wait a few seconds here. And let's make sure that resume, we should be about the same amount of damage that we were when we left it. And sure enough, we were. So we know that the pause is freezing the time exactly the way it should be. So excellent. Now in the next one, we're going to add a few things to our health by adding some audio and text to make it a more complete health system where it'll ping or scream when you're doing the damage, and when you're doing the health, it makes another audio sound, and then when you die, it'll say, send up a text that says you are dead. Feel free to try that out on your own. It's always a good practice to see what you can do without seeing the videos. Then come back and check and see how we do it. And like I said, there's no one way to do things, but it's good practice to learn it on your own as much as you can, and then see if there's a better way to do it from there. Alright, just before we get off here, I wanted to show you the power of what you can do with the UI, especially in a 3D world or something like that. Now granted, this is not done, but this is something that we're using on a game that we're creating called Vector 21. And you can see even with a simple menu, you can add so many different lines of code that if you're not organized and you're not commenting correctly, it can get very confusing. Now granted, this is still pretty small compared to a lot of games, but just in this one main menu script, we're talking about 400 lines of code. Now, if you come in here and take a look at it, it's got a lot of features that we can actually go into. Let's take a look at the options. I can actually go over to our audio, and I've got it where you can change the different genres of music. And you can actually switch the songs from that genre. We can set the volumes up, and it'll save when we go out of it. Let's take music all the way down, or let's leave the volume up, and let's turn the music down, and you'll be able to hear the effects. So when we come back out, it's saving that presets, and you'll actually be able to hear the little heart monitor go off, even though it's very silent. there is so much we can do with some of this stuff, and it makes it incredibly powerful. And I just wanted to show you some of the things that you could do if you took the time to set something up. Well, I hope this explains a little bit about the power of UI, and it inspires you to do great things, and we can't wait to see what you can create from this. But let's get back into what we're doing with our project, and on the next one we'll try to add some new features to it. And from all of us at Crazy Carrot Studios, we would like to say thank you. And don't forget to please like and subscribe. We will see you next time when we get back to Learning with Bob.